Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
Hey, I'm KC.
And I'm Tyler.
And you're listening to
The Element Podcast.
What is happening, all you woods people in the woods and in the waters? I tell you what, it's kind of water season out there. We're driving over the lake right now. We're headed to the big DF Dub to pick up our friend Garrett to do a little bit of hog hunting this week. And I'm just looking at the fishing opportunities out there. We've actually been discussing this a little bit. We got pigs on our heart, but man, fishing's on the brain, Tyler.
Oh, yeah. 70 and mostly cloudy. Just, it is time, dude.
Ooh, man, yeah. The back corners of them coves are about to start boiling, if you know what I mean.
By the time our buddy leaves the old East Texas, we're going to be doing some fishing. I mean, we're going to need to be doing fishing. I know that.
Yeah, for sure. We actually were talking about loading up the freezers with some fish, which is something I'm really interested in. We got some plans for that. And food acquisition is one of the things that really drives what we do a lot. You know, we eat a lot of pigs. We eat a lot of deer. Eating a lot of nilgai right now.
Let's go.
Eating a lot of elk as well, or have. It actually got buried in, so it's actually kind of a good thing in my freezer right now. I have chest freezers, so all my elk is at the bottom, which means like I'm going to get to eat that this summer,
you know,
which is pretty cool.
This brings me to a thought here.
What's that?
I practice this same thing. You know, it wasn't long ago I was a big-time Pop-Tart eater.
Yeah.
You know, I said big time, not big.
BTPT.
Because you can get big eating Pop-Tarts for sure, but I wasn't necessarily a big Pop-Tart eater. I was just a big-time one. The way to eat a Pop-Tart, in my opinion, and it's not that I don't like the crust, but it's crust first. And you leave the middle, and then you eat the middle last, and you leave yourself with this flavor in your mouth that's like, yeah, that's the one I want, you know? And I think you do that with like, you should do that with all kinds of things. Like if you do it with a steak, you might leave that crispy, salty crust edge. Oh, yeah. And that's the last bite you want or whatever, you know? So
I do it with a burger for sure.
Yeah.
Like I eat most of the burger, but I leave like a meaty part, and then I eat that bun part, and then the last bite for sure has every ingredient. You know?
Yeah, it's a thing to do. So maybe this is good for your freezer to when you're going back into deer season next year, you'll be finishing on some elk instead of some deer, you know?
Yeah, we actually got a lot of eating to still do. It's crazy how, like, how you pile up some meat through the year if you have a good season. We're definitely blessed with that for sure.
Especially you.
Well, I got a bunch of dadgum cameramen that won't get their meat out of my freezer too. They got it their own house. Now I'm about to drop it on the porch.
They're the worst,
They
dude.
are the worst. Oh, man. Well, anyways, as you might have heard, we were on the Meat Eater podcast this week with our buddy Steve and Hunter and Jordan and some other folks, and we got to talk about a lot of cool stuff. It was fun. We didn't get to talk about this, and it's a thing that we wanted to bring up because our friend Steve Rinella set the hunting world on fire.
He has a hot take.
He loves his hot takes. He does. He says, well, we'll just let him say it. How's that sound?
I personally, man, like I think
and I'm raising my kids to feel the same way, mule deer are 1,000 times cooler than whitetails. Why? Because they're just mysterious. They're more mysterious.
So, Tyler, we decided that we didn't want to talk to Steve about this in person because he would interrupt us a lot. So we would instead talk about it on our podcast. That way he can't.
No rebuttals.
No rebuttals. That's right. Because he's too smart for us to handle, on a face-to-face basis. But although y'all will be interested in Meat Eater trivia when it comes out. That's all I'm going to say. You'd be very interested in that. Yep. Right, Tyler?
You'd be very interested. I hope. My heart was beating a million miles an hour, that's for sure. I was interested.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So there's a couple things that Steve made a point there about the whitetail and mule deer differences and how he thinks that mule deer are cooler, which is a arguable, debatable point. Which I appreciate that much about it. It's not.
He's not talking about temperature, though, right?
No, I don't know if they know the exact running temperature.
They definitely
of each.
are cooler if their temperature.
I can tell you this. Right now, there's probably whitetail and mule deer in Sonora, Mexico, that are sweating their booties off.
That's true.
So
that's true.
Which is kind of a weird thing because the rut's later down there too, and it's going to be hotter. So I don't know how that works. But anyways. It's not like he's like, oh, yeah, man, marmots, those are cooler than whitetail. It's like, no, they're not. I mean, marmots are pretty cool, but, it's a sliding scale, right? Like pretty much all furred animals are pretty neat to me. But mule deer and whitetail are close. And here's how close they are, actually, guys. This is probably the coup de grace, I think, as they say, but we're going to lead with it. I was a biology major for about 15 minutes in college, and I learned a lot because I was.
What did you major in after that?
Yes. So I was a biology major for a year and a half, and then went G-stud and
two-stepping.
And then went two-stepping and girl chasing, and psychology is where a lot of people end up because it's the easiest one to get into. And then I just left because they made me. But in my studies, I was really interested in ecology. That's what I really wanted to study. I actually wanted to be a person who dealt with freshwater fisheries.
So study of ecology is basically what?
Ecology is ecosystems. So I wanted to work on the ecosystem level, which would be things like evaluating everything from water quality up to herd dynamics and everything in between, and even atmospheric things. So
can you study, like when I think about economics, there's macroeconomics, right, and micro. Yeah. Is ecology more of a macro concept, or is it just like, are you still studying all the very fine things?
I think
sometimes.
There's probably an actual professional in the world who can give you a better answer than me. But in my mind, if you're an ecologist, you have to have a mastery of a lot of things.
Gotcha.
So you have to be able to work down to the micro level, but
put
also
a puzzle together.
You also are most likely cooperating with other specific professionals in the realm as well. So like, an ecologist probably works closely with a botanist and a microbiologist and a couple of and things like that.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live, headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
But the reason I liked ecology is because it also pairs well with hunting, because we all understand as hunters that ecology, or that like it all works together, right? That's the way God made this thing. Everything works together to function the way it's supposed to. And whenever humans come along, sometimes we mess that up a little bit, or at least we would like to track how things are changing. That way we can adapt to it, or whatever you want to say. Anyways,
go
ahead.
Just to interject, so I have been over the course of the last 4 weeks or more, probably been listening to that same podcast that we just referenced, where Steve and Joe are talking. Right?
It's funny it takes you 4 weeks to finish the podcast.
I know it's so long,
we're
and
old, dude. We're so
have
busy.
all of like 20 minutes, a week to listen to it. But I, as I've listened to it, I think later on, one of them talks about how, because they started talking about like whitetail deer management type stuff, and some of these guys that manage deer, and then there was something like one of them referred to like how odd it was to see like guys that had shot big deer, record book deer, or whatever, that didn't even know what kind of tree they were sitting in or whatever, which is like, it's funny to me. This is why you're a good deer hunter, but you like the ecology aspect and you think that it helps you as a hunter. And there are other guys out there that like don't know what tree they're sitting in and are killing big deer, but they don't kill necessarily. Those guys aren't killing big deer all the time. They just have killed one or whatever.
But there are guys who are like that. I appreciate you saying that too. But like, say for instance, our friend Brian Bostic, we were sighting in a scope at my house today. Brian has killed his fair share of big deer. And I propped the backstop of our target up on a small pine sapling, and he said, is that cedar big enough to hold it up out there? You know what I mean? And I didn't bug him too much about it. I actually didn't even mention it. I just thought it was kind of funny, because it was like, like I would never, you know what I mean? I would never. But to him, it wasn't that big of a deal, you know? That's a cedar, some kind of green thing.
It's a needleless tree.
That's right. It's all types, man, you know, like, and some people just are real good at the strategy game. Yeah.
Or like whatever they are decent at, they find a way to make deer work for them that way. So like they may not know trees very well, but they might know like, trails. They may just be good at understanding which trails are the good ones that get you, or tracks or whatever. What's the actual fresh track look like, Yeah.
Well, the big thing that you need to think about, all right, when you're thinking about whitetail and mule deer is this, okay?
All right.
What I learned throughout my schoolings, which take that for what you will, okay? And education is only worth so much. Is that, and there's probably some more details to this, but to qualify something as a separate species, it cannot hybridize with another animal and have viable offspring. So let me try to say that a different way. Donkeys and horses are separate species because a donkey and a horse make a mule, and mules are not
sterile.
Yeah, they're sterile. They cannot reproduce. So like one mule can't find a donkey or another mule or a horse and have babies with it. That's not, mules are done whenever they are born. So
for our northern friends, that'd be a wiper.
That's right.
A wiper.
Wipers. We call them hybrids.
We call them hybrids because they're hybrids that don't reproduce.
Yeah.
But
supposedly. Then that's where things get weird, okay? Because mule deer and whitetail can mate, reproduce with one another, and then those offspring are viable and not just able to reproduce, but able to function completely normal and natural. So it would be one thing, and I think that there's a scientific argument to be made, is that if an animal, say for instance, can hybridize with, I'm going to take something goofy just to make this easy. Say a goat and a giraffe. Say they can hybridize, and they come together and make a meal guy. And that animal can, in fact, breed. However, it is killed by a coyote in its first 6 months of life because it just can't function very well. That's still not what you'd call a viable offspring. A viable offspring is healthy. Yeah.
Okay.
So it can't be a lab rat, pretty much, and still be considered viable.
So, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, and somebody might argue differently than that, but that is kind of how I perceived it. You can't make
this
this thing
be like a lame duck kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it can't just be like a dumb looking hybrid thing.
Yeah.
It's gotta work in the real world.
I gotcha.
So, mule deer and whitetail can hybridize, have viable offspring that continue to pass on their genes without complications throughout the rest of time.
Which brings up the point.
Are they different species?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And then,
what would you say?
I would say that
Hot take.
I'm conflicted on this. Because I like different species. I like the idea of there being Columbia blacktail and like regular blacktail, California blacktail, or whatever they are, and then mule deer being separate from those, and then whitetail being separate from mule deer. I even like the idea of the different types of mule deer or of whitetail, because I think it's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. However, I don't have to call them different species to recognize that they're different. And I think that in there is where the cookie crumbles.
So they're just real quick. Yeah. Man, I keep butting in on you.
No, this is good. I don't need to talk so much.
I think you do. I just want to kind of draw some conclusions and clarities and stuff. So when you say different whitetail, you mean like Dakota, Carmen Mountain, Virginia, Texanus, or whatever.
So there's
different. There's like 7 of them or something.
Who knows? Right? Because you look at a different website and it'll say a different number each time. But there's different varieties. If you've traveled the country much, you know whenever you go to Nebraska, the deer look different than they do in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. The deer in Minnesota look different than the deer in Mississippi.
Yeah.
There's islands that have deer specific to them in Georgia. Like, deer are neat, but that doesn't make them a different species. That just makes them a different looking type of one. Subspecies
is there a way to
is what they call
scientifically classify that?
No, because you know why I think this, and this is where I'm going to get in trouble, all right? So this is KC going off on stuff. I don't believe in evolution in any sense of it, except for, this personal beliefs, all right, y'all? Noah loaded kinds of animals onto his boat. So Noah didn't have to take a mule deer and a whitetail on the boat. Noah just had to take a deer on the boat. Odonochelus, or whatever actually kind would be even, okay, so kind people come over from Germany and Spain. That's how you remember this, all right? So kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. I believe family is kind. That's where those words are synonymous. So you have to have a family to consider something different. And I don't believe that things evolved into those different families. I think that those families of animals were put on earth by God, and then whatever we have now is just how kind of things have changed since that happened, okay? And there was a bottleneck of
would you say adapted would be a good word?
Adapted, changed. You can say evolved as long as you don't mean like
monkeys to man or
algae
whatever.
to humans. Yeah, that's fine. I don't think that like the concept of an evolution is bad. I do think that the theology of evolution is really bad. It's not even bad in the sense of good and bad and morality, but it's also just really weak science because there's not a lot backing up there. But either way, that's not what this is about today, at least. What we were trying to get at with that, though, is that I don't really think that the Linnaean nomenclature, I believe is what it's called, where you have the genus and species name is built upon the kingdom, phylum, order, class, yada yada. So I don't know if I believe that is right in the first place. I don't think we classify animals the right way because I'm a creationist. And the way that animals are classified in science is from a evolutionist standpoint. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I do.
So, like, the whole thing is messed up, in my opinion. We can't classify hippos in the same family as orcas or whatever the weird one is, or dugongs or whatever, because it doesn't make no sense. It's not it's not real, right? So, all that to be said, if the animals can breed and make viable offspring, they're the same animal. Okay?
Yeah.
It was just like, I saw, this is a very interesting point that I saw someone make on TikTok. I know, I'm sorry, okay? But
hey, dude, I mean,
there's cool stuff on
it's
TikTok.
part of reality right now,
It is, man. There was a man at the turn of the century, turn of the 20th century. So it's 1908, I think, who was presented at the Chicago World's Fair. If my details might be wrong with this, but
apostrophe S Worlds.
He was from Africa. He was presented as a missing link in existence. This is a human, a black guy, right, from Africa, who was racially motivated, the actions here, to present this guy as the missing link between apes and humans. All right? And he did look a lot different than the white people who were around. That doesn't make him a different critter. And would you say that a Congolese person looks more or less like you than a whitetail does to a mule deer? No strings
probably,
attached here.
Probably less.
Probably less, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about a mule deer and a whitetail, at some sort of distance. Oftentimes, if you're in crossover territory, you can't tell for a while.
Oh, on the does especially. I have to get them to turn their ears around to tell the difference.
But that guy, not only it was probably his facial structure different than mine, but he's probably literally the figurative term of black and white.
Yeah.
Being different than each other, right? That's kind of like skin-wise, that's one of those things.
Let me say, too, I fully believe that was horrible and evil and a terrible thing.
Sure.
But it's just the example to be used is that at some point in time, the science world thought that they would point out that it's a different classification of human, and so you take that. And there are individuals around this world that look a ton different. We're all considered the same race, and I think we are. I believe we are. So if this mule deer can also cross up with this blacktail and also cross up with this whitetail, how is that any different than the people around the world? So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that we could be looking at a lot of this stuff all wrong. But we've actually made it probably 1% into the podcast that we're going to try to do. So.
But the main question still remains. Can a blue marlin and a striped marlin breed together?
They might be the same thing, right?
Offspring.
Yeah, I think so. Well, the way the dispersed spawning works anyways, who knows what's happening, right?
I think it's probably mostly just mullet out there, and some of them turn into marlins.
How weird is it that, dadgum, how many gar breed carp eggs every year in the back in the shallows, because it's dispersed spawning. So it's literally just swimmers out there finding eggs and going in them, and that didn't work, but it's just kind of weird, to think that's the way that it's done.
Yeah.
But so the question is, from there, now that we've established that these things are all the same anyways, okay, what we're looking at here is phenotypic traits, which means what's observable.
Right.
And oftentimes it is either what you would call culture or habit, or there's probably another word that's better for this, but the way that animals interact that keep them from breeding and hybridizing and causing each other problems. In fact, we did some hunting recently for nilgai and whitetail, where those things were actually living together harmoniously and didn't really even act like each other existed, even though they're on the same landscape, you know? So it's like there's something to just their mannerisms, or they look enough different, which those things aren't going to be able to interbreed. That's not really what I'm saying, but it's just like things can exist on the landscape and be different things even though they're in the same spot, right? So I guess where we're trying to go with this is what makes them different and what makes one or the other cooler. And this is going to be subjective, right? Because you can measure antler length, and you can measure body weight, you can measure population density, you can measure all this stuff, but you can't measure coolness or how mysterious something is. Those are immeasurable things. So at that point in time, we just have to have a debate, and nobody's going to win, right? But I think that I'm not sure I can tell Steve he's wrong, and I'm not sure I'm willing to not be on his side, but it's probably worth talking about the differences a little bit more because we know both of these critters pretty well. You, in fact, killed a really nice mule deer last year, right? Was that mysterious for you, Todd?
It was mysterious, actually. It was. And so here's to give a little context here. We aren't able to play, obviously, the whole podcast between Steve and Joe. You heard a little clip of it, but some of the things he mentioned are that the deer are more mysterious. They live in more, I can't remember quote for quote, but remote or wild places, right? That urban sprawl is better for whitetails. What else maybe was mentioned in there? Anything else? And we'll address some of this stuff as we go, but just kind of off the top of the brain.
How sensitive they are to humans.
Sensitivity to humans. And Joe made some good points too about that kind of were rebuttals, but we'll kind of go through all some of this stuff and talk about it because it is worth looking at. And in the end, I want a lot of people to go hunt mule deer more than whitetails so that I can shoot bigger whitetails,
right,
man. So, you probably could tell that we are whitetail fans. And I hunted I hunted mule deer this year in Colorado. If you haven't seen the video, it's on the channel, the Element channel. It's actually been pretty wildly popular. I thought, pretty good mule deer. He's big frame. He's not like a high scorer, but I kind of just did this kind of slower paced hunt with like no music until the very end or anything. It's just kind of a day by day thing. See the struggle, and it actually, I guess, relates pretty well. Which is cool.
Pretty common comment on that video. Is people are like, "It's one of the best ones I've ever seen." It just felt like I was there. It was like, good. That's what we're going for.
That's what we're hoping for, So, and sometimes you're like, man, or do people have the capacity to like watch this thing in this day and age and with attention and stuff? Do they have the attention to watch it? And they do, apparently. But anyway, that's a time that I hunted mule deer specifically, and there were no whitetails there. And I've shot a forky mule deer in the southern panhandle of Texas before. I have let's see. I don't know. Have we ever? I don't know if we've ever stalked any deer in like crossover country. Any mule deer?
I stalked
that's right.
one
You did some
in South Dakota.
Yeah,
wasn't very big, but I was like, "Hey, I'd love to shoot a mule deer. Never shot one, so it'd be cool." And
so we spent a lot of time in crossover country. I think they're super cool, but I kind of wonder, like, are they cool because I haven't spent much time around them?
Yeah.
And you have to, like, take that into account when you think about how cool they are compared to a whitetail. I have a lot of points that I think would build up my case for making whitetail cooler. But one of the things I noticed when I first hunted in crossover country, like I said, southern panhandle, which this goes back to, this is an interesting thing. My wife's granddad actually had a property there in that same country, probably in like the 2010s, and they had trail cameras all over this property, and they had a lot of mule deer with no forks. If that gives you any, you can follow what I'm going for.
That's kind of a. I see that a lot in the southern mule deer anyways. Arizona, New Mexico, Sonora, Mexico, all this stuff. Like, you see a lot of those mule deer with, like, what we would call a 8-point whitetail frame.
Yeah.
You know, just normal looking G1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. So interesting thought there for sure. Like, I can almost guarantee you, looking at some of these trail camera pictures, that there were crosses.
Yeah.
In this herd.
And you know, we've looked at. I might be subtracting from your point here, but we have mounts, shoulder mounts.
Yes.
We actually just did a video about this that'll come out soon about how to choose a shoulder mount and yada yada. But we've looked at this from deer that are from some of this crossover stuff, and there's a large discrepancy in ear size and coloration on the ears on some of these deer.
I was just fixing to talk about this.
Okay.
I have a mount from crossover country that I pulled out of my storage when we were true whitetail bums that, like, I didn't have a house for 3 years or whatever. And I pulled this thing out of storage when I get my house built, and I put it up on the wall, and the first thing I noticed was, well, dadgummit, I didn't really think about this, but this deer is, like, not only is he more gray than any of the other deer that I have on my wall, but he also has weird black tips on the end of his ears, and his ears are larger than any of the other whitetails on the wall.
And he has double splits.
G2s. Yeah. How about that? Yeah. That's right, dude. So, but 100% shot him thinking he was a whitetail. And I don't know how you'd prove it at this point if he wasn't. But, like, he certainly, in my opinion, like, here we are, we're on a podcast. You and I don't have to listen to anybody else. We get to make opinions. My opinion, this deer is a crossover almost 100% in my mind.
Is this a recessive trait that's kind of showing up, or is this a deer whose parentage was one and the other?
I think parentage.
Really?
Personally, yeah.
That's cool.
But I wonder, like, my thoughts are this. In crossover country, when there's drought, I feel like that mule deer may be, in my opinion, in my experience, that mule deer may be the first ones to kind of fully disperse from an area and kind of head towards the Rockies or whatever they do.
Which is weird because, in general, mule deer do better in more arid country than whitetails do. That's one of the things. You take a state that has, like, badlands, and then it has, like, river bottom. Then the whitetail will be down in the river bottoms, and the deer will be up in the mule deer will be up in the badlands. Well, but I've seen what you're talking about, where when there's a drought, then mule deer get out of Dodge. They go find them something else.
Yeah, whatever they're doing, like, they will disappear. And maybe in that fringe country, maybe it has to do with whitetails being dominant. Maybe it has to do with whitetails being more prevalent on the landscape. And so, like, overall, the whole, you lose X amount of deer, and it just completely takes, like, the whole mule deer herd out of the area or whatever. So I don't know.
Mule deer we had a doe mule deer on camera in farm country. You remember that?
Yep, I do.
And it's like random.
Yeah,
she ain't nowhere near any mule deer. Like, there's like. Okay, when I say mule deer habitat, one of the things about mule deer is they're roamers. They like big country, it seems. And there ain't any big country around there. There's a couple little like creek bottoms or whatever that are dry. You might call them a canyon or a coulee or whatever, but it ain't like a hold a mule deer type thing. She's a long way from home.
Yeah.
What is she doing?
Man, that's a good question. I wouldn't know where to start, really.
Yeah. It's just, I think you don't have to actually tell me the real answer as much as just like, it's like the hypothetical of, like, what is going on with these deer? Like, what are they? What is their function?
Yeah.
And are they really different? Are they really special? Or
I don't know, but it makes me wonder, like, in crossover country that has generations after generations of interbreeding, at what point are we even 100% certain any particular deer is a whitetail or a mule deer?
Yeah. We're going to title this podcast The Trans Issue because we're talking about, deer that are trans between mule deer and whitetail.
Yeah, they're transient deer. That's what they are. So anyway, that's just a couple, like, anecdotals about my experience with kind of whitetails and mule deer. Now, when I think about like some of the differences that I have seen in whitetails and mule deer in my time spent in crossover country, which has been now probably decades now, actually probably a couple of decades that I've hunted in some sort of like crossover country. When we first started hunting, I can remember in Texas, I can remember this one wheat field, and there was a spiked mule deer that hung out in this wheat field every single day. And sometimes there was whitetails out there, and sometimes there was other mule deer with him. Mm-hmm. But he was there every day. And I know one of the first things we noticed when we started hunting that country was that it seemed like mule deer, we called them dumb.
Yeah.
Because they would hang out in those wheat fields and just look at you 50 yards from the road while you were stopped, taking pictures of them or whatever, and looking at them. And the whitetails would run off, and the mule deer would stand there and look at you. And this isn't like mountain remote, but this is remote country. This is small town Texas Panhandle country. So there's not like tons of people around. They probably see a couple cars a day at least, but it just, I hate to generalize that all mule deer are this way, but I have seen some mule deer do some really just things that are just a little bit less wary than whitetails.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you think about like some of the towns you've stayed in Colorado, little towns or fishing in Colorado or whatever, and some of the like just straight up backyard deer that walk 10 yards from the back window of the cabin you're staying in or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know that happens with whitetails some, but I just don't think I see it the same way as I do with mule deer.
You know, my take on this is a little different because I haven't hunted that middle ground stuff as much as you have where they both exist, but I've hunted the areas where each one exists quite a bit. And my experience that I always like to think about on this is I've elk hunted in Colorado during mule deer seasons and seen trophy mule deer bucks that I could shoot multiple times with my bow, and they'll just look at you. Or you'll jump them out of their bed and they're bound out to 60 and turn around and look at you. Well, let me let you know something. Any old boy with the open sight 30-30 is going to smoke that thing down.
Yeah,
you know,
crossbow.
So it's just like, or just, you know, a guy who feels confident in his abilities with the old vertical bow.
Yeah. Yep.
But they just inherently have this shoot me thing going on that whitetails do not usually.
Yeah.
But the opposite of that is the one I stalked in South Dakota at one time. We jumped him out of his bed, and he ran as far as we could see him.
Yeah.
And it kept running.
Yeah.
I mean, literally miles.
They have the capacity to go.
Yeah.
For sure.
They do.
You know, I think about them like, for instance, the deer that I shot was in a very remote area. We horsebacked in. If you haven't heard the podcast, we have a podcast on it. It talks all about the trip. It was just unbelievable. So much fun. Incredible, once-in-a-lifetime type of deal. Just so blessed to be able to have done that. But where I shot that deer, not necessarily far from human, you know, like hikers essentially.
Yeah, actually
right?
Wasn't, right? Like,
Yeah.
There's a lot of people around.
Shoot. We, you know, on that particular day, I left Eric at the hiking trail, and he saw that deer from the hiking trail, like within a couple 100 yards, within 200 yards of him easy. And so, I mean, they see people, even though it's super remote, because hikers they'll get weird, man. They'll just go wherever they want,
Yes.
dude, you know? And I can tell you where people aren't hiking, and I won't highlight or spotlight anything right now, but there are some remote places in this country that are just not really hiking places. They're destinations that get real hot and real cold, and they're super remote, and they have lots of cattle ranches that are thousands of acres. And guess what? If there ain't cattle on them, there's not a human within miles of these places. In fact, I hunted a place this year, and you have an idea at least what I'm talking about right now, but you know this place. We walked on public for a mile and a half, and I was looking at deer that were probably almost 2 miles from me, heading over like into the next draw, and that draw would be like 4 miles from the nearest entry of any sort. At the closest entry would be 4 miles.
So the closest a human can get to one of them things on a wheeled vehicle is 4 miles.
Yeah.
And we
where
ain't
they were
talking
going.
about the closest highway.
Yeah.
We're talking about the closest trail or anything.
Right. And surely they see people in the year, some.
Yeah.
But that's a remote animal.
Yeah.
And it don't matter if you've gone 10 miles into the backcountry on horses or if you're, a mile and a half in looking at deer. There's still these things that have to do with the private and public, like intermittent use by people and how that all works together, that is a dynamic we'll almost never understand. I think you talked about it in the last podcast when we talked mostly about postseason scouting. Like, there are things we don't understand about. There's so many variables when you go to find a deer that even if you look in the same type of habitat in the same type part of the country, that it could, even if it's only 500 yards apart and it looks exactly the same, sets up the same, whatever, it may be completely different because old boy runs a four-wheeler over there every night just to check on his hog feeder or whatever he's doing. You know, you just don't know those things.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to generalize that mule deer are actually maybe more mysterious or whatever, or less inclined to hang out around the urban sprawl or people or development or whatever.
Well, it's also your personal experience as well. Whereas, like, Steve Rinella grew up hunting whitetails in Michigan, which is like the heart of whitetail hunting country or culture, right?
Yeah.
So, they were so normalized to him growing up, which we're similar, except we've kind of fallen in love with whitetails. I would say for me all over again. You probably never have been out of it, but Steve's now moved out west doing the meat eater stuff, and now it's kind of like a whole new world. It is a new frontier, as I guess it's semi-ironic because it is the West, right? Like, it's a new thing to hunt and to chase and do, and there's things you don't understand and know because they're just different from what you grew up with.
Yeah.
And so there's that whole thing going on. I think that, one of the things that I like to do is, when we're talking about subjective things like this, take the non sequiturs out of it. If you look at mathematics and statistics, you took some statistics in college.
I think I did. I can't remember that far back.
Up. It's a terrible class, and this is basic statistics. But like, whenever this is stuff that I had from biology, but say you take samples of like the average body temperature of frogs or something, and then you've got 36 samples, and you've got a bell curve of what those body temperatures were, and then all of a sudden there's a couple random ones over here. You just throw those out because something went wrong, or that just doesn't make any sense why that's there. So you could do that for the deer that you see on a golf course or whatever. It's like, well, that's a dumb thing. Yeah, not dumb, but whatever you want to call it. It's just like a thing that isn't normal. Okay, so you just take them at kind of their extremes. Like where do whitetail live and where do mule deer live, and how do they operate? You and I were talking a while ago. We have seen whitetail at 7,800 feet, and I found a first-hand account of a guy on a forum a while ago that he seemed to be pretty trustworthy in the way he was saying he sees whitetail at 8,700 feet pretty often. Now, mule deer do go higher than that, but that's a high daggum whitetail.
Yeah.
That's above a mile high, like a long ways above a mile high. Okay, so whitetail can inhabit high country, and here's another point. Which of these animals is it currently expanding its range within the continental U.S.?
Be the whitetail.
It is not the mule deer. That's right. So whitetail, who knows? We might find in 10 or 15 years that they are up on the 14ers in Colorado, which wouldn't that be cool?
Oh.
I mean, I've seen them traverse country that is that rough. It just ain't that high in altitude.
Yeah.
And I'll let you know something, too. Daggum whitetail are just as able to, I guess, immigrate or migrate. They don't have, like, traditional routes like a caribou does or whatever, but like, I know from living around these things and seeing them in parts of the country that they know when it's time to go 4 miles that way because we're running out of resources over here. Like, they get that stuff. So they would be able to figure out a way to come down when it's winter, just like the mule deer do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can say, oh, mule deer live in harsh country. Well, no, they actually don't.
Yeah.
Whenever you were up there in September hunting that deer, was it harsh?
No.
It was nice, wasn't it?
The sun, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, but other than that, man, it was 80, 78, 76.
What do the mule deer do whenever the leaves fall and the temperature starts getting real low?
They go down and find some food in a valley next to the nearest town.
That's right.
It's some hay that somebody put out for them, you know?
Yeah, so they just both can inhabit extreme areas and both know how to be good overcomers on that. Now, the other thing that's pretty measurable on deer that everybody thinks about is antlers, right? And
this plays into what Steve said about he thinks that they look cool, you know? Yeah. And they do. Mule deer look cool. I got one on the wall now. It looks awesome.
They do look cool. And one of the things I've always remarked about whitetail, though, is they have the greatest variance of any animal. Like, there is hardly any whitetail that looks like another one. There's a lot of mule deer that are like in the 160 range that are just big, what we call, 8 points or whatever. They're 4x4 mule deer. You know, they got forks on their twos and they got forks on the fronts. And there's a lot of mule deer that look like that. And they look awesome. They look really cool. But there's just not a lot of whitetail. Even an 8-point whitetail, one of them's going to have main beams that curve in. One of them's going to have main beams that go up. It's going to have tines that lay over, tines that go straight up, yada, 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 yada. It's also different. And then also, when it comes to trophies, mule deer do have the edge as far as, like, overall size, but not as much as you might think. I looked it up, actually. The world's record, it's with an S, by the way.
Apostrophe.
The Boone and Crockett. Boone and Crockett is who keeps up with this stuff, right? So it's world's, WORLD''S, world's record whitetail is a found buck. So it was not shot by a hunter. And it scored 333 inches. Isn't that what I read?
That's net. Ago? I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah, that's net. And like 333 and 7/8, okay, which is astronomical, as you would say. The world's record hunter killed is by Luke Brewster. It's like a 270 something.
327.
327.
Net.
Gosh,
So missed it by 5 inches.
Almost the biggest outright. If it was panel scored again, who knows what might happen.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Because the world's record found was at 325 for a while until it got rescored. So it's weird how this stuff works. But it's not neither here nor there. The world's record at mule deer is let me find it here. Sorry. A 355 and 2/8, which is...
It's a big elk.
It's a big elk. That's right. It's insane, right? And it looks awesome, too. It ain't like some freaky, weird-looking thing, which the whitetail kind of is. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to shoot it, and I'd freak out and probably die. But, there's not a ton of difference in a 333 and a 355. So, at the top end, they're pretty close.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. I think it would be median, maybe. Is the median though of a mule deer quite a bit larger than a whitetail?
Probably, and so people use median and mean kind of synonymous.
Yeah, maybe,
and they're different. Mean is the average. Median is the middle. So the problem with median,
mean would be probably the actual more proper term.
Median, it gets thrown around that way a lot too, so I don't think you'd be wrong in saying it, but median actually means the exact middle, which can skew the data one direction or the other. When you talk about medians, maybe there's a whole bunch of...
Because median would technically be the middle of 355 and 0.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So it would be an average, probably.
Actually, that is if you only have 2, and you have a 0 and a 355.
Oh,
a median takes into account each individual, so you have 36 of them. You take the top, what would that be, 18, and you actually need an odd number. You need 37. Take the top 18, the bottom 18, and the one that's right in the middle, whatever its score is the median score.
Well, I guess median could work then still.
Well, median, here's where you get the problems. What if you have 18 spikes and one little forky and then a bunch of big ones?
Yeah.
Their median is still really tiny because the little forky is the median, even though the average is actually bigger than that. So I like
But median could work because it is still based off of all the hunters' takes, right? Well, maybe not. I don't know. That's interesting.
I
for
like
sure.
average better.
I do too.
I think
I
think the average whitetail is going to be smaller than the average mule deer.
Yeah.
One of the big reasons I would say too, as well, is that you have a lot of, and let's take mature buck average too. Because you're going to have like a bunch of 1.5s that mess this thing up anyways. But if
like 3+ year olds or whatever, maybe.
Yeah, you take the average 3+ old mule deer across the mule deer's range, and they're all going to be decently large antlered. Well, you take a 3+ old whitetail that is from like southern Georgia or something.
Yeah,
it might be just because that's
exactly right.
how they are.
Mule deer, 3+ mule deer average body weight is going to be way higher than, even like the smaller mule deer are going to potentially be a lot bigger than a hill country Texas whitetail average body, because of the variance that we were talking about earlier between whitetail. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, overall, I think if you shoot like let me just throw some random numbers out there. This may be way off, but if you shoot a mule deer that is 3 years old, like he may average 130 inches or 140 inches. You shoot a 3-year-old average whitetail, he might be 115, And when you look at percentages, that percentage of difference is way higher than 355 to 333 or whatever, you know?
Yeah, so, for sure. Well, I think that is probably a good just discourse on whitetail and mule deer. And I really don't know if I could just say one is cooler than the other. They're just so different. I enjoy them for what they are. I do like the fact that you can hunt whitetails more readily. I think it's one of my favorite things about them. And it's probably a pretty underrated quality of them, because it's pretty hard to go hunt mule deer every year. If you ain't hunting whitetail every year, what are you doing?
Yeah. You can find a way to do it, man. It is. It's something, it goes back to what we were talking about with like the food acquisition, right? Like, when you think about just the basics of living in life and how food, shelter, and water are kind of the basics, and getting your food can be done through hunting and fishing, then whitetail is a very common way and a common man's approach to go out and do what he needs to do to live, as opposed to go out and make a name for himself or be, shoot the biggest trophy. Like, there's so much more than just, and obviously I love big deer, but it does have these cool, I don't know if it's a stigma or whatever around it, that's like very much a common thing to do. It doesn't make it extraordinary. And when I think about like maybe perpetuating hunting, even despite like anti-hunting sentiments and animal rights activism, whitetails make sense. You know what I mean? Mule deer, awesome. In some states, yes. But in the country of America, on a federal level, whitetails and maybe turkeys could be some of the, maybe waterfowl would be like some of the top 3 animals that make sense to do this kind of sustenance style hunting, at its very basis, And I don't want it to ever be just sustenance, because I want to be able to go out and enjoy time with my friends and family. But like, it's hard to argue with humanity living for thousands of years with sustenance fish and sustenance animals. You know what I mean?
That's right, man.
So it definitely whitetail hunting bodes well in its case against anti-hunting and animal rights activism.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think that is a fun thing to talk about, and the discussion will never end. I think that we do need to remember that you need to make it fun. Things like this are fun. I know Steve and Joe Rogan were talking about it in a fun way.
Sure.
They weren't trying to make it like those guys are idiots, you know. And I think that's a good thing. And when we lose the fun, we lose hunters, man.
Yeah.
So we need to make
another
sure.
thing that they should remember is that there's a pig video that just released. From the element,
that?
and that when you talk about sustenance and stuff like that, man, I mean, pigs, dude, come on.
Yeah, eaters.
Nothing tastes better, hardly.
Every single one's a thing you can shoot, and every single one you can eat.
Targets
man.
and
Golly.
eats, man.
It's good. Well, remember to go watch that video, and remember, this is your element.
Live in it.
Well, I've always heard blood is thicker than water. It's why she moves so slow when you look down upon her. Well, I can see a cross, and it still looks the same. It's a rain.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.